everybody. Welcome back to Mind Your Nest. I'm your host, Jennifer Rosen, and I'm in studio today, and I thought I'd talk about what I do. I know I've talked a little bit about the name of my business and where it came from and the meaning behind Mind Your Nest. I think I've talked about that concept and that way of life. That was something that I grew up with, sitting at the kitchen table with my family. My dad always talked about minding your business, minding your matters, minding your financial matters, and taking care of yourself. So Mind Your Nest means many different things for me. And I decided to go out on my own a little over a year ago and help other people mind their nest, helping them keep their house in order. But what does that really mean? So years ago, they didn't really have a name for this, or I didn't know what it was really called. But several years ago, when I really started working with clients, there's an organization called the American Association of Daily Money Managers. So I am a daily money manager. So you're asking, well, what the heck is that? What do you do then? So I'm just going to read you a little blip describing from the AADMM's website what a daily money manager does and how they help their clients. So a daily money manager is a financial professional who provides personal financial services to individuals and families and who manages personal daily money matters such as bills, budgets, record keeping, and much more. These professionals provide personal financial services to older adults, people with disabilities, busy professionals, high net worth individuals, and the small businesses they own. So, who is the typical daily money manager? The typical DMM holds a bachelor's degree and has 3 or more years of experience. These diverse professionals may have worked in businesses or social services before starting their private practice, and they can be found across the U.S. in small towns and major metropolitan areas. One of the benefits of going on to the AADMM's website, regardless of where you live in the United States, is you can find a daily money manager in your area. They have at the top locating a DMM. So let's say I'm in Delray Beach. So you can either put the name of the city where you live in, you can put the zip code, and you enter that into the search field. And then you can enter your parameters. Do you want somebody that's 5 miles away, 10 miles away, or does location not matter to you? And then you click search. And then you get a whole list of people that hopefully are within that demographic. And fortunately, since I started my business, I've really been so blessed that people have found me through the website. You know, sometimes you're not really sure if other people know the resource and how to find you. Especially if, like myself, I really don't advertise a lot on social media. I guess my primary way of advertising or talking about what I do is primarily on LinkedIn, although I do talk about it a little bit on Facebook. Anyways, back to what we do. So I'm just going to give you a few examples of tasks and responsibilities that we help our clients and how we help them manage this process. So the DMMs, we cover a broad range of tasks, and it really has a lot to do with the background and the client's needs. However, the scope of personal financial services generally includes bill paying, including calls to payees regarding incorrect bills and preparation of payments, reconciling checking accounts and investment statements, preparing and making deposits, organizing tax documents, negotiating with creditors, reviewing medical insurance papers, and verifying proper processing of claims, providing general organization of financial papers and systems, and then referring clients to legal, tax, and investment professionals and to community resources. A couple of things to clarify of what a DMM is not, and this applies to me. I'm not an accountant or a CPA. I'm not an investment advisor, and I'm not an attorney. However, my role as a DMM for my clients really fuses with the other trusted advisors for the clients. If you can imagine, when you go to your accountant, if you do go to an accountant for tax preparation or consulting, typically you're paying an hourly rate. And coming from a family of accountants, I've talked about, my dad and younger brother, their hourly rate does not justify this type of oversight. It doesn't make sense for, let's say, my dad, who, I don't know, he probably at some point he charged north of $500 an hour. It doesn't make sense for him to kind of get into the weeds and manage this type of responsibility or workflow for his clients. So when I was working for my dad and younger brother, I would help take care of what we called back then the personal bookkeeping for individual clients. Clients would come in with either shopping bags or boxes filled with papers, receipts, checkbooks, and a whole host of other documents. And we would empty those items in the conference room on the long table, and I'd start going through everything and helping those clients start organizing, start taking a look at what they actually needed help with. And that was, years ago. People weren't utilizing technology as they are now. Back then, I primarily worked with surviving widows, and they were primarily women that were seniors who had recently lost their spouse. And they had two issues going on. They, number one, were grieving the loss of their spouse, which can be a full-time job, experience, emotion in and of itself. But when you add on this other responsibility of taking care of your house and making sure the lights are on, well, for a lot of women who never were involved in that process at all throughout their marriage, that can sometimes leave you flat on your back and you don't know where to go. You're paralyzed with fear. So it's a learning process for these clients that have really never been part of paying the bills, knowing how much money is coming in, how much money is going out, if they had any insurance policies. Do you have a long-term care policy? How do you know how to move through the insurance game and prepare for transitioning to Medicare and having to take out a supplement? Who do you go to for that type of help? And which supplemental insurance policy do you take? So it's a whole new world that for a lot of women primarily have never been exposed to. And I say that it primarily affects women because in my experience, women have, and this is not a negative take on women, obviously I'm a woman, but women typically acquiesce to their husbands. They were the homemakers, they raised the children, the husband primarily was the one who worked and, provided financial support for their family. And I saw that with my parents. It was kind of like you divided and conquered. Now, my mother had worked over the years, but she had never worked full time. She was a part-time travel agent. She was a part-time teacher focusing on disabled children, but she was always around. And my dad, being an accountant, once you're in tax season, we didn't really see him a lot. So some people might say, oh, well, that was back then when I was younger, or that doesn't happen now. Women are much more involved and educated about financial matters and really taking care of themselves and being self-sufficient. I would agree with that. I'm a perfect example of that. I've talked a lot about, how I've been on my own as a single full-time working mom for over 20 years. And I credit my ability to understand and move through not only my new life as a single mother, but also in understanding how important it is to be aware and understand and make sure your bills are being paid. And I credit that to my upbringing, those conversations around the table about minding your nest. And I was really fortunate because if I ever had a question, I had tremendous supports. My dad, my younger brother, and I always knew where to go for help. But at a certain point, I knew who my resources were. I knew where my supports were, but I was confident enough at most times of just figuring it out on my own. And I was really fortunate, very lucky. So my experience in this whole life transition from a married woman to now a divorced woman wasn't as turbulent as it is for other people. Now let's go back to the acquiescence of women to their husbands. It really is continuing in today's society. It didn't just happen with, let's say, my parents' generation or my grandparents' generation, but when I was working for a not-for-profit for over 8 years, I was working at a synagogue, and I was managing all their business and financial operations, and I was the money girl. So people would come into my office, pay their bills, come in to let me know that they were having some financial difficulty or that their husband lost their jobs and that they needed to talk about a payment plan or really putting them on hold for a little bit until their husband was back on his feet. But there was also a different conversation that happened, which I have to say really surprised me. I would get calls from the moms, the females, the mothers, and I would make those calls too when I needed to follow up about a bill. And it always surprised me because I knew that these women mostly might have been in their late 20s or 30s. They had a couple children. And I would ask them a few questions about bill payment and the balance. And they would say, I don't take care of the finances. I don't know anything about it. My husband takes care of everything. And, I ended the conversation, and then I would just think to myself, like, oh, no, please don't say that. Please be more involved. And that really surprised me that for some people whose life's dream was to get married, have children, be a stay-at-home mom, and that was it. And I know a lot of these women, not like it really matters, but a lot of them were college educated, had worked, come from a working family, whether they're middle or upper income or whatever, that really didn't matter. And it was like they just wanted to table that part of their brain, and they just wanted to fully be in the mother role, which I completely respect. I going back in time, I don't really feel guilty that I was working full time when my children were at daycare or somebody else was watching them. That was just my reality. But I also was able to be a mom on one side and then take care of business on the other. And I remember I would always think about my conversations with some of these wives where they said, well, I don't take care of any of the finances. You'll have to call my husband. And I would think, God, I hope that's never my daughter. As you know, I have a son and a daughter, and I want them both to be responsible, fiscally responsible, contributing members of society, that being a bum will not work with me as your mother. In any event, so time would go on, and a few of my very closest friends started going through the divorce process within the past few years. And some of them had that same reaction, had that same blank look on their face when we would talk about things in terms of paying bills, how much money comes in, how much money goes out. And the response was, well, I don't really know. And they all of a sudden had to have a really quick education starting at step one. And for some women, that step one is learning how to turn on a computer, figuring out, where is your email? Is it AOL? Is it Yahoo? Is it Gmail? How do you create an email? I want to go on a trip. How do I book a flight? I'd like to open up a bank account. How do I do that? And sometimes it's as easy as, how do I learn what type of insurance I have? And those are some really big adult responsibilities and can be overwhelming to one person that all of a sudden is thrust into now having to be the boss, the cook, the cleaner, the candlestick maker of their life. And that can be overwhelming and depressing for a lot of people. So that's where I could come in as a daily money manager and help. A couple of the specific responsibilities that I just described, that's a general idea of the type of support that I provide my clients. When clients or potential referrals reach out to me and they tell me how they got my name and number, we have a short conversation to try to understand what their immediate needs are, what their short and long-term goals are, and how do we move forward. It's really a conversation. Sometimes it could be 15 minutes. I've had conversations with potential clients for about a half an hour. You want to get to know these people as human beings. And as most people know who know me, I'm a people person. And I don't just say I'm a people person, but I really am. And I love sitting down with people, getting to know them, having an understanding of where they came from, and then figuring out how I can help them. And really, for me, the only way to do that is to be in person, to meet them in person. And the phone call is the first step. You can kind of get a sense of who somebody is over the phone. And the next step after that is making an appointment to go to their house. I never do any of my clients' work at my home on my personal computer. When I go see my clients, I'm there to work. I use their computer. We log into their accounts at their home while they're sitting next to me. That's just something for me personally. I think it's very important. Having integrity was and is a huge part of who I am. Growing up in the house that I did, being trustworthy, being somebody's confidant, that means a lot to me. I don't share and would never share personal information about a client or a situation and attach anybody's name to it. I just want to give you one look into when it was a real life situation, and I realized it didn't really matter if you had a lot of money or a little bit of money. I was working at my dad's accounting firm, and I was putting together tax returns to send to clients back in the day when we had to make photocopies and put those "please sign here" stickers on. And I was putting together so many tax returns on a daily basis during tax season. And I had one tax return that I was assembling. It was kind of thin, which means, not a lot of investments potentially, just a simple 1040 return. And, they had a small balance due. And then I had another tax return that I was assembling. And I don't even think those heavy staples were able to go through this pile of papers. And I remember receiving the extension payment for this client, and I think it was in the millions. And I was like, oh my God. But the one critical thing that I learned is that you treat every client the same. It didn't matter if somebody wasn't making what I thought was a lot of money, and it didn't really matter if somebody was making oodles and oodles of money. I had great examples of watching how people treated every client that walked through the door, and I knew that's how it should be. You shake hands the same way, you look in your client's eyes the same way, and you sit and you listen, and you let your client know that you're there to help them. So back to an initial client meeting. So I have a conversation with the client, get to know them a little bit, set up an appointment. So I go to the house, I bring a little, I think it's a 5x8 or a 6x9 spiral notebook with me, my business card, and just start chatting, asking them what they're looking for and how I can help. One of the things that I do right away when I get to a potential client's house is I kind of peruse or, look at their home. And I look at where, do they have a specific place where they do their work? Do they have a computer? Are there papers strewn everywhere? Just to get a little bit of an understanding of where this potential client might be in terms of needing assistance. Some people, there are piles of paper everywhere. I've had clients that somebody would probably consider beginning of the hoarder stages. And then sometimes clients are really, their office looks like my dad's office. All the papers are in the same place. There are no pens or pencils out of place. They're all in their pencil holder, and it's very neat and clean. So we start having a conversation, and I get to know them a little bit more personally, where they've come from, a little bit about their background, if they were married, if they're now a widow, if they're divorced, and just listening to them talk. And, sometimes people don't really know what type of help they need when it comes to this type of stuff. They know they need a little bit of help, but sometimes they don't really know what else they might need help with. So sometimes that initial meeting is just that, an initial meeting. I ask them any questions if they need any other information from me. And then sometimes I'm just on to my next appointment because they're not quite ready to get to work, which is okay. Sometimes people need a little bit of time to digest. And then maybe in their own head, they need to figure out, well, what specific help do I really need? Other times, when I'm there for my first meeting, we get right down to work. We start opening mail. We start going through old paper files. We start pulling out years old paid bills. We start putting together individual pieces of paper that might be strewn about their house or apartment or office. And we slowly start figuring it out. The one thing that I typically ask my clients is, as I mentioned before, what are your immediate needs? Are you at risk for your lights being turned off? Also asking about insurance policies, long-term care policies, wanting to, of course, ensure that they're not at risk of losing any of their benefits. Sometimes we go onto the computer, we create accounts for those clients that want to learn a little bit more and want to get more computer savvy so they can maybe be a little bit more autonomous and do a couple things on their own. And other times we're just filling out those green hanging files and file folders to start organizing all the papers. So sometimes the visits can look a lot different. I was at a client's yesterday. Lovely client. Oh my God, they're so adorable. And what I love about them, I've talked about this a lot, is I'm old school. I still use paper. I have a 10-key calculator with the tape. I write. But on the other hand, I'm also somewhat computer literate. but I'm not quite ready to be all in with technology. And there are clients of mine that feel the same way, that they go to the bank with a check and they get cash that way. Some of them are easing into using their debit card and going to the bank and take cash. And then others that are older than I am don't use cash at all. And I still walk around, with some bills in my pocket. I just can't get away from it. You just never know. The grid might come down one day, and then what are you going to do if you can't use your credit card? If you can't use your Apple Pay on your phone? What then? So this client of mine, he has had a system in place for many years where he takes a sheet of paper every month and he writes down all of the companies that they have to pay, all of their expenses on a sheet of paper in alphabetical order. And he makes columns. And he'll put the name of the bill, the amount due, and which account it should come from. They have several accounts, and they're very organized in which account they want which expense coming from. And I really liked it. I was over there yesterday, and we were going through July, and it was very organized. The bills were in alphabetical order. We went on the computer, and I paid a lot of bills. We were verifying account balances, making sure that automatic payments had come out of their bank account, and then we were done. We had worked on a few other things, but this is a system that they've had for many years. And I think that there's a little bit of decline in mental acuity and at the beginning stages of cognitive impairment, which is why I've started working with them. And it's great that they've had a system in place for so many years. I don't believe in reinventing the wheel if there's a system in place that works and that can continue to work. I'm not here to start a revolution in bill payment services. That's not the point. The point is to just make sure the work gets done. On the flip side, I've had clients who are all about technology. I had a client who, she's 97, amazing woman, and she wanted to be on that computer. She wanted to log in. She wanted to understand how to get to her account, see the balances, verify that checks had cleared on her own. And so we did that. She also had thousands and thousands of emails going back to 2008. So I also do that. I help clients clean up their inboxes, unsubscribe to unnecessary companies. The world is now filled with the unwanted, unnecessary emails. You know how you would get advertisements in the mail? Well, now you're getting it in your email and or via text message on your phone, which can be extremely aggravating. So I would go in and I would help unsubscribe from a lot of these companies, delete a lot of old unnecessary emails, create files in the email to kind of organize so that when the client would log into her email account, she wasn't seeing thousands and thousands of emails going back, over 10 years, 20 years. And then I also help with your cell phone. A lot of people keep their contacts pretty, they're pretty basic. I've started to really put a little bit more information in the contacts because this way I have all my information in one place. For example, if I have, let's say, my United Airlines, I put United Airlines, I put my account number, I put the phone number, I put the website in. For one of my kids, I put their name, their phone number, obviously. I put a star for emergency contact, which means that whenever they call, even if I have my do not disturb on, I'll always be able to answer the phone. It will not go directly to my voicemail. Another thing that you can do, in addition to clicking on that red star in your contacts, which I've done as well, is I will go into the first name field in the contacts and put ICE and then let's say dash Noah, which is my son's name. So that's another way that you can identify who to call in case of emergency. If God forbid you were in an emergency and you couldn't speak and, let anybody know who to call. I've also noticed that some clients just put a name. They just put Jennifer in the phone number. That's it. Sometimes they really need more information than that. And they have, their old-fashioned address book, which I still love. I think it's terrific. And sometimes I'll suggest that we update the contact information on their phone so it kind of matches their paper address book, just in case they might be infirmed, just in case somebody is helping them and needs to access some more information and doesn't know where the address book is. Or maybe the client just has their phone, they don't have the address book, and they don't remember some really important information for people that they really need to reach out to. In the contact section, you can always put in the notes how this person is either related or what their relationship is. Is it an aunt? Is it a next door neighbor? Is it a cousin? Is it the postman? Is it the private Uber driver? That's so helpful, especially as people age and start having some cognitive impairment. It just makes it so much easier when your client is in need and they're not able to communicate either who they need to call or what their specific need is. The phone sometimes can be the answer. So let's go back to my 97-year-old client. So she had her paper address book. I don't know how many years she's had it, but oh my gosh, amazing. I feel like it should be in the Smithsonian. So, lots of changes. She has a very big family, grandchildren getting married, having to update information, grandchildren moving, having to update addresses, grandchildren getting a divorce, having to update addresses again and phone numbers. And what I appreciate so much of staying in the paper and pen or paper and pencil world is that for a lot of people, they need to write things down so that they remember, so it keeps their brain moving forward, so they're engaging and they're remembering. For some reason, I don't know why, I think that thinking that you typing on a keyboard into a computer works the same way, it doesn't. Handwriting and writing things down takes attention. I have horrible handwriting. My parents had incredible handwriting. My dad, obviously, being an accountant, he only used ledger paper for everything. His to-do list, his projections, his whatever. Oh, his buying Christmas gifts, even though we're Jewish, for all of his grandchildren. He'd have a column for each grandchild. And he could write the number 5 inside the smallest box on ledger paper. I just want you to close your eyes and imagine this for a second, for those of you that know what ledger paper looks like. He could write a 5 without touching any of the lines. It was amazing. I was like, oh my God, how'd you do that? Beautiful. It was really hard to learn how to forge a signature. My mother is an artist. She's not active anymore. Beautiful, loopy, pretty, feminine-looking handwriting. It took me a little bit to try to get her signature down pat when I was in school. When I didn't feel like going to school, I kind of had to, crucify her handwriting just to make sure that I got a break on Tuesdays when I didn't feel like getting up. Myself and my brothers, horrific handwriting. And our way of ending Heckman would always be to turn and do like a loop across the name. I mean, it's very interesting. In any event, handwriting for me has always been a little bit of a challenge. Sometimes I'm a cross between printing and writing in cursive, which I swear is like a dying characteristic. I don't know why they don't still teach it in school. It's so helpful. You know that yellow paper that had the lines? You had to write lowercase and then uppercase. I don't know. It's kind of helpful, you know? The A's were always really challenging for me. I'm not quite sure why. And then the K's too. Completely destroy them. But I always felt like I kind of understood a little bit more about what I was writing when I was writing. And when I'm on the keyboard, I can just type away. You know, I was really serious about my typewriter back in the day. I don't know, I think I typed over 50 words a minute, whatever. I mean, that doesn't mean anything now. You know, the only person that thinks it's cool is me. And, you know, I'm not putting any medals on myself. But for some people, you know, when they're typing, they're not really absorbing. So even though people think I'm crazy, I still encourage for those people that do write to continue writing, because it helps your brain continue to move forward and to remember and to not stay dormant. So that's my one little tip of the trade. One of the things that I will tell you that I kind of had a feeling would happen is how much I truly love what I do. As I said, I'm a people person, and I'm not a fake people person either. You know, my kids would just tease me endlessly because I would, you know, always stop to talk to people, you know, when we were going about our day. When I'd be having my father-daughter either dinners or brunch, you know, between my dad and it took us a really long time to finish our meal. And that was really a good thing. You know, as I said before, I watched with amazement how my dad really worked with his clients and built and nourished his relationships, both personally and professionally. I'm that same way. I don't know how else not to do it. My personal and professional relationships are so important to me. To really be there, to really listen, to really look in somebody's eyes, and to pay attention to your conversations. Not look around and see if there's anyone better that you could talk to. Be authentic, be honest, and be there. Be a listener. Don't just listen to respond, but really listen. I've heard some of the best stories and some of the most devastating stories by making sure that I'm 100% into the conversation. And I do that with my clients. I do that with new people that I meet and have met since I've been in Florida. Wanting to understand, wanting to learn. You know, I grew up in the North Shore of Chicago. We were kind of the same. It was a little bit homogenous. Not saying that's bad, but when I moved to Florida, there was like this energy and excitement about meeting people from all over and really learning about their upbringing, their culture, their family, how they got to where they are, what they do for a living. I mean, I've met people that do so many different things that I've never heard of before and think are so cool. And they're not an accountant, a lawyer, or an investment advisor, which are important, you know, professions, but you know what I mean. So my clients are really important to me. My relationships are really important to me. Responding to my clients is really important to me. And making sure that I'm there for my clients is really important to me. Getting to know them, getting to know their family, where they come from, their grandchildren, and really hearing them when they talk about their frustration as they realize that they're they feel that and they know that their cognitive abilities are slipping, and really being there to listen and support them when they voice that fear, anger, shame, which really happens a lot with older people. You know, nobody is getting out of life alive. We all are meeting the same end. And the most important thing, especially for older people or people with disabilities or people that are impaired, deserve the respect, the time, the attention, and especially the support to help them through. And I really love doing that. I've been in some homes that make my heart sink, but I never show it. I tell my clients I'm always here for them. When I walk into a client's home, I give them a hug. When I leave my client's home, I give them a hug. That's the only way I know how to do it. You know? Yes, I'll shake hands and everything, but to me, like I said, my responsibility is really personal and private for a lot of people. And I don't believe that clients are transactional only. They are important people in my life. And I can't tell you how much I have learned since I've decided to be a daily money manager. Really, it's really expanded my understanding about the aging process and also the reality that not everybody has somebody, and how everybody deserves to have somebody in their corner, supporting them, helping them. So in closing, everybody, I'm going to do a little pitch. I figure, why not? If you know anybody, whether they're an older person, a senior, somebody in transitional period of their life that is going through a difficult time, a newly single man or a woman that is overwhelmed and really needs help with all the papers and the bills that are piling up, or needs any assistance whatsoever, maybe a postgraduate young person, young adult, just getting started and doesn't have support, doesn't know where to begin to start being fiscally responsible and start setting up a system so that they don't go down the wrong way and get into debt and get into a compromising situation, please call me. My number is 847-421-2560, and all of my information will be in the show notes. And with that, my friends, I wish you a wonderful day. And as always, don't forget to mind your nest.